In this video, I'm going to be talking with a very special guest to discuss whether an actual anxiety diagnosis is helpful or not so helpful. Tim Box is a remedial hypnotist, mind coach, and author who specializes in helping clients overcome all kinds of anxiety-related issues. He's the author of the Amazon bestseller Clear Your Head, and you might know him from his TED Talk, How to Stop Feeling Anxious About Anxiety, which has now had more than 2.5 million views. I thought we might talk a little bit about the idea of diagnoses and whether or not you think like an anxiety diagnosis is sort of a good thing or a bad thing, or...
Well, this is a bit of a hot topic for me because obviously people probably, if anyone knows me online, it's from my TED Talk that I gave about anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of talk a little bit about that in terms of the pathologizing of anxiety, the idea that we might get diagnosed with anxiety as if it's an illness. And I think this is largely because of the origins of our diagnosis. A lot of the time we've been to the doctor because we've had physical symptoms that we're upset about, we're concerned about. And then the doctor runs his tests, everything comes back negative. And then he's like, right, this is anxiety. This is why you're feeling this way. And then we make this mistake of thinking that we've been diagnosed with anxiety. Like the doctor has diagnosed with this anxiety illness. He might even have said, you might have an anxiety disorder or something like that. We might even go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist and they might say, yeah, you know what, you've got generalized anxiety disorder. And as a result, it can have negative repercussions. Now, I should, first of all, to give both sides of the story, I think there are good things about getting a diagnosis because, after all, if we do have something that's going, what we might say going wrong with us, then our diagnosis is our first step towards getting the help we need. So the good things about it, I think it helps us understand what's going on with us, why we're feeling physically in distress when we don't seem to have anything medically wrong with us. So that can help a lot. We can recognize, hey, look, I'm not alone. There's other people that deal with this as well. Because I think that's the thing about anxiety. It can have us feeling very isolated, can't it? And also it validates our feelings a little bit. It's not just me being, I don't know, when I was going through social anxiety, I assumed I was the only person going through it in this way. And I assumed it was part of my weakness, that I couldn't quite handle the same social situations that other people seem to handle perfectly well. So knowing that there's something that we can say, that's what's going on with you right now, it can be of great help. But from my perspective, in terms of the clients I see day in, day out, their diagnosis hasn't necessarily helped them. In fact, it's done them a bit of harm, because the main thing they become anxious about then is their anxiety. So if you think about yourself in a hugely anxious state of mind, then somebody says, oh, you've got an anxiety disorder, then suddenly you've got one more thing to feel anxious about.
Yeah.
And then whenever you do that very natural thing of day to day, getting anxious about the things in your life, which is not a problem, that's what all human beings do. Anytime you feel anything going on with you that you would regard to be in the vicinity of anxiety, you increase your anxiety because now you're anxious about the fact you're feeling anxious. A bit of you saying, oh no, my illness is flaring up today. This is a bad anxiety day. Did I not eat the right things? Did I not sleep enough? That kind of thing. And you're starting to regard it as this illness that you're desperately trying to get under control. So every time you feel it, you increase it, it amplifies it. And I think that the other thing is as well, that as soon as we get this sort of diagnosis, it locks us in a little bit. It's almost like I'm then always going to be anxious in some way. I'm always going to be dealing with my anxiety disorder. I mean, I don't know if you're in a similar position with the clients that you see when you're helping other people with anxiety.
I will always suggest going to see a doctor first. And the main reason that I would suggest that, even though it can open up a big can of worms, potentially, is that many symptoms such as, let's say, frequent urination or dizziness or something like that, that could actually have a physical origin. So you wouldn't want to be told by a therapist, for example, that, hey, you're just experiencing anxiety, when, hang on a sec, you might have diabetes or you might have epilepsy, for example, right? So you need to go to see a medical doctor or a general practitioner or a specialist to see whether or not you have a physical condition, right? And if so, then of course, get that treated by the doctor or a specialist or whatever. If not, and he puts it down to anxiety, well, hey, yeah, at least sort of what you're dealing with. In terms of, can it make things worse? Yeah, I think it can make things worse. And I think when people get told, oh, you've got an anxiety disorder, particularly because it's come from a sort of a medical authority figure, it has more kind of substance to it versus if, some guy down at the pub said it to you, right? So it's sort of like, well, this guy said it to me. He's a trained medical professional. He would know, right?
Yeah.
So it's good. I think it's good to go through that experience of going to the doctor, having that kind of physical issue ruled out. Beyond that, I think it's a good idea to think about, talking to a psychologist or a counselor. Or
I would say that the doctor is not going to be a specialist in our emotional well-being. They're going to be a specialist in all those medical things that you're talking about. So let's get them to rule that out. And like you say, then let's explore that other field. If we could understand when the doctor says it's anxiety, if we can understand it's like, okay, then that means it's outside of my lane. You would probably be better off with a professional here, but but we don't get that extra sentence, that extra sentiment, that extra thought, because it's just, this is anxiety. And you might get a leaflet on how to deal with anxiety, might be from your GP as well. But there is also a trend for the person in the street, when they feel, I think this might be an anxiety issue, they still go to the doctor first, because don't regard themselves as going to see the medical professional to rule out medical issues. They go there because I think anxiety. Can you diagnose me and give me my anxiety meds, kind of thing? Yeah. So it's I guess it's all about education again, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, and I think there has been, from my perspective, I think it's a bit of a myth that's been perpetuated that anxiety is a medical condition, but when people feel like, okay, I'm experiencing anxiety, they see that, okay, well, that's a medical condition, therefore I go and see a medical doctor. And I know there's going to be people watching this who say, well, hang on a sec, it is a medical condition. I would say that it's not a medical condition. I would just say it's sort of like more of a behavioural, environmental kind of issue from my perspective. Feel free to disagree with me down in the comments if you like. Something that I've kind of noticed, and I don't know if you've sort of noticed it as well, maybe over the last sort of, I think particularly the last 5, maybe even sort of starting a decade ago, maybe, that there's a bit of a trend in sort of like getting a mental health diagnosis and kind of wearing it around like a bit of a badge of honor. I don't know if you've kind of noticed that.
Well, this is the thing, because obviously we're on YouTube, we've got our YouTube channels, and obviously we have social media aspects to that. And inevitably, we're probably seeing a lot of people posting about anxiety and depression and emotional and psychological issues. And there does seem to be a trend of that now. You get the hashtags anxiety warrior and things like that. And people they're very vocal about it. Now, this is a good thing. Again, it's a good and a bad thing. It's good that we feel empowered to create community and realize what we're going through so we can help each other out. But the problem being is that it's almost like, you go onto anxiety forums, people aren't discussing solutions to get the other side of anxiety. And if you actually talk that way, hey, look, here's good one, then you're shut down. Then you might even ban from the group, because we're here to discuss and kind of be united in our ongoing, everlasting struggle with anxiety. Yeah. And I think that can be a very, very bad thing. It can almost be like a toxic environment. You go to a support group, you're not getting support. You're getting a perpetual state of people who are really, really anxious and don't see there to be any way the other side of it. But there's this thing, obviously, in therapeutic community we call secondary gain, which is sort of the hidden benefit of our maladaptive response. Now, it's important to say as well, this is not a conscious, deliberate choice. This is a pattern of thought in our subconscious. Our subconscious is a very clever thing, and it will come up with strategies for our best path towards our fulfillment and happiness. Now, so we might say, like in a therapeutic context, people might remain in some way ill or in some way struggling because it's only when they struggle that they get the attention or the love or the validation or the significance that they crave. You know, if we've been neglected, and yet it seems like when I declare my struggles, loads of people, you know, they hit the heart button or the care emoji on my post, they comment, you know, then it helps me. It gives me the, you know, the little dopamine hit that says, yeah, this is, I'm being comforted here. Yeah. And so a bit of our mind says that was a good strategy. And so we can't get the other side of it, because that would take away that thing that brings us the comfort, you know? And I think, yeah, there is a trend of this becoming part of our identity. Yeah. And as I say, I want to double down on the fact this is not like people sitting there at home thinking, I need more attention. What can give me more attention? I know, I'll tell everyone about my anxiety disorder. It's a need that is being fulfilled by the declaration of that anxiety disorder.
The idea of secondary gains, you know, so basically the benefit that you derive from not overcoming the issue that you're dealing with. I just use the example that if you stay home from school when you're like, say, you know, you might not be feeling so good, or, you know, or maybe the anxiety got the better of you, or you were just sick for whatever reason, and, you know, your mum took extra sort of special care of you, right, while you're at home, and at home you got to sort of eat chocolate chip biscuits and play video games, then it fulfilled that sort of comfort that you were sort of seeking. And therefore, you know, you can easily be tempted to think, well, this isn't a bad go. I might be kind of sick a bit more often, right? So
your mind creates an emotional strategy, and it's simply that's how these things. You know, we talk about environment, but, you know, the environment might have given rise to the emotional strategy, but the emotional strategy is now in our psychology, and that's what then perpetuates and moves forward, and then we find ourselves upset that it's being applied in situations that we no longer agree with, or something like that. So when we get stressed, suddenly we're reaching for the tub of ice cream because that's what mum gave us as a kid, and things like that. And yet now we're an adult, we're like, now I just feel worse about myself because I've just had this whole tub of Ben and Jerry's, and now I feel depressed on top of stress.
If you were to use the word anxiety disorder, I don't know if you do or not, what would you mean from that? And how would that be different to sort of how a doctor might sort of have a definition of that term?
Okay, so I don't diagnose disorder. I don't diagnose anyone of anything. My job here is, this client comes in and says, I'm currently thinking, feeling, or behaving in this way. I would rather think, feel, or behave in this way. And then it's like, right, you're there. We want to get you there. How do we do that, kind of thing? But I do deal with a lot of clients who've been told they have a disorder, and as a result, they have this sort of barrier to their belief system that says, I'm operating within the confines of what I understand a disorder to be. Yeah. And probably what they understand a disorder to be is what they've experienced so far with what's going on with them. Yeah. Now, the first thing to say about a disorder is it's not a permanent state. It's a temporary state. Okay. So this isn't like you will perpetually be carrying this disorder with you. This doesn't define you. Yeah. So, and I always go with the dictionary definition of disorder for this one, because I think it's the most easily applicable to what's going on here. And that is a state of confusion. So what's happened is your mind has become temporarily confused, and our job here is to clear up the confusion. And a lot of the time, I think, as we've said in another video together, is that the thing we become confused about is something like terrifyingly wrong with feeling very anxious. Because we might have had physical responses to it. Our heart might have taken off. Our muscles might have all tensed up. We might have had all these racing, intrusive thoughts. And we've thought that means there's something going wrong with me. And so we become confused enough then to be terrified of that perfectly natural, healthy response. So for me, a disorder, whilst it might be perceived as on the same spectrum as illness, or condition that I have to deal with, it's just a current state of affairs, the way you're thinking right now, and it's confused. You could argue as well that in the same way people say like all physical pain is some form of inflammation, you could argue that all like emotional distress is some form of confusion or conflict in your mind. And so that's how I see it. Anyway, I don't know how you see it, and if that correlates with you.
I've come across, a number of people who will be kind of stuck in that anxiety cycle sort of 5 years later, 10 years later, because they're in that kind of state of confusion, thinking, Well, I just can't sort of get over the fact that I had this, chronic anxiety or this panic attack sort of 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out what it is that caused me to be anxious. Yeah. So therefore I can kind of, if I can figure it out, then I can do something about it. Right.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
this constant state of trying to figure it out just kind of perpetuates the anxiety for day in day out, and just keeps going on for many
Yeah.
years. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it's really important to clearing up that kind of confusion, and let people know that, hey, what they're experiencing was a completely sort of normal emotional or psychological result of what they were going through at the time.
And this is it as well.
Yeah.
We have this confusing experience. So at some point in our first panic attack, we've probably let ourselves get run down, get overstressed over time, or we've had an all-nighter or something like that. It's remarkable how many people I've seen, and their story of their first panic attack, they won't say, "Oh, I was just out of nowhere, suddenly went into panic." They'll say, "Well, I was very stressed at the time. Well, we were out all weekend on a hen do." There's all these things that would make us physically or emotionally quite drained.
Yeah.
And then, of course, our bodies had to do the natural thing of our heart racing, or it's regulated the energy going in and out by changing our heart rate or our temperature or our perception. We've got a bit dizzy maybe because we're running low on all of those resources, those physical resources, and their mind has gone like, something's going wrong with me and I don't know what it is. Yeah. And as a result, we've done the very natural response to what appears to be in some way threatening. We've gone into a very high fear, maybe even panic state.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we perceive this as, I just had a panic attack. And it's not, it's just you created a confusion in your subconscious. And now you're focusing on those physical symptoms whenever they happen, because there's a bit of your mind that says, I have to keep an eye out for that. I'm playing sentry looking for these physical symptoms now, because a repeat of that, what was perceived to be a life-threatening situation. And we've missed the point here that it was my body doing a very natural protective mechanism, and panic attacks cannot kill me. They just feel like they can.
Let's say somebody has been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, right? Let's say they've been diagnosed with that, let's say from a psychiatrist, for example. So if you're feeling like you've been kind of railroaded, like with a diagnosis, how would you kind of, sort of respond to that?
I'm a big believer that to a certain degree, you're the expert on you. You know what's going on with you. But if we understand that it's a temporary state, and it's transient, then it doesn't really matter what somebody else thinks is going on with us.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time, that's the problem with it, is that the diagnosis is perceived to really matter. Yeah, it's like, it's really important whether I've been diagnosed or not. And I think what I'm saying is that when we detach any importance on it, then we no longer have to create the feedback loop we were talking about. Because that's all the work I'm doing. I say all the work I'm doing, probably a good 70-80% of the work I'm doing is getting people to disable that feedback loop. So that then they can do the thing of, okay, I might be getting a bit anxious about work, overly anxious, don't need to be that anxious about it. Like me, I was getting overly anxious about social situations. What are people going to judge me? What do people think of me? Do they think I'm nice? Do they think I'm bad? Does that mean I am nice? Does it mean I am bad? All that sort of stuff. If we can get rid of the feedback loop, then we can just start to do the work on that, and people talk a lot about, don't they, okay, get your sleep, eat the right foods, look after yourself physically, because that will reduce anxiety. It reduces anxiety because then you feel like you've got a greater degree of resources to deal with life's challenges. But if you're dealing with the second fear, the feedback loop, you need to disable that first. Because you could look after yourself as well as you like, but if at any point where you feel anxious, that's the worst thing in the world, that's the most terrifying thing rearing its ugly head, then you'll always feel highly anxious. So I think we agree in the fact that you don't need to be pigeonholed, because it's somebody's opinion, it's their description of where you are currently emotionally. This is the thing as well. I think I don't get afraid of all this stuff, because I don't necessarily think of it as a mental health issue. I consider it like an emotional well-being issue, because I see all of this as our emotions.
Yeah.
Anxiety is an emotion. That's what it
Yeah.
is. What is anxiety? It's not an illness, not a disorder, not a malfunction. It's an emotion.
Yeah.
And if we're just managing our emotions, that's something we can get involved in and get in control of,
I just want to thank you for coming on the channel, Tim. And I hope that you'll agree to come on again. Feel
Yeah,
free if anybody sort of, puts a comment down in the comment section, feel free to sort of, chime in and respond as well. And again, thank you very much.
been an absolute pleasure, Tim. Good to chat with you.
Be sure to check out Tim Box's channel, where we openly discuss our own struggles with anxiety and how we got on top of it. Also, pick up a copy of Tim's Amazon bestseller, Clear Your Head. Till next time.